Hey, you guys, gals, and bums, and welcome back to A Few Bad Men. Alright, hope everybody's doing well out there. Alright, I see that subscribe button is not doing so well. You guys left him laid out in the street for me, like I said. Good job to all you guys that went out there and bumped off that subscribe button for me. It means a lot. Alright, today we got a guy named Big Bill Dwyer. Now, I've spoken about Bill in a few episodes. You may have heard of him. Let me see, the Legs Diamond episode, I think I spoke about him in the Vanny Hagen episode. So here is Big Bill Dwyer to kind of fill in those gaps. All right. Now, Big Bill was a guy who was big in his time, but his name hasn't trickled down through time as one of the big guys. But Bill was one of the biggest bootleggers in the early 20s, not just in New York, but in the whole country, at least the whole eastern to the Midwest. All right, he took the crime late in his life at 37, which is not the norm for the gangsters and bootleggers of his time. He also wasn't a violent type of guy. He was more of a businessman, not a gangster. All right. But before we get into this video, I just want to know how many of you guys out there have seen every one of my videos. If you're a Few Bad Men gang member and you've seen all my videos, leave a comment down there, AFBM. Let me know that you're one of the guys or gals who's seen every one of my videos. All right, now let's get into it. William Vincent Dwyer, known as Bill, was born to Irish immigrant parents, Michael and Margaret Dwyer, in New York's Hell's Kitchen on February 23rd, 1883. Now, there were two gangs prominent in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood during the time Bill was growing up. You had the Hudson Dusters and you had the Gophers. We spoke about the Gophers in the Only Manning video. You need to check that out. But Bill had strict parents, and they kept young Bill out of the jaws of the main streets. So unlike many of his friends, Bill finished public school and began working life without a criminal record. He met and married a local girl named Agnes Frances Cassidy, and they soon started a family. They would eventually go on to have 5 daughters. He started off as a movie theater usher, and then he spent some time as a longshoreman on the Chelsea piers on the New York waterfront, which would open his eyes to business opportunities in the future. Dwyer used his education and natural intelligence to start his own backstreet illegal bookmaking operation, which would prove to be highly lucrative and gave him the dough needed for a greater involvement in the criminal underworld. Now, Bill was hired for that stevedore job by a guy named J Shelvin. This was before the Volstead Act was announced. All right, George J Shelvin was a childhood friend from his days in Hell's Kitchen, and he was the owner of a string of working men's bars around New York City's waterfronts. But he was now struggling to stay in business, even though there was a steady flow of illegally made bootleg beer. The standard or quality of the beer was driving away even the hardest drinkers. And on some occasions, it was even killing them. All right. But Dwyer thought of a solution to his friend's problem, informed by his experience working on the docks. The American government stored vast quantities of confiscated alcohol in many warehouses that surrounded the Chelsea Pier. Once Prohibition began, there were a few small-scale attempts to steal this hooch. They were clumsy and largely unsuccessful. Dwyer knew that there had to be a better solution, and not just violence. He believed that violence was unnecessary and bad for business. Dwyer and J Shelvin became partners, and together with a small group of longshoremen who were all Irish and spawned of Hell's Kitchen, formed a criminal gang with the aim of acquiring alcohol stored on the docks by whatever means. What set Dwyer apart from the other bootleggers at his time was that he and Shelby largely pursued a policy of nonviolence in their attempts to attain the liquor stored by the authorities. They started bribing key employees and forging false permits to withdraw huge quantities of industrial liquor that they then sold to other bootleggers. Bill wasn't the flashy, flamboyant bootlegger, all right, like some of these other guys. He was more of a businessman than a gangster. And as his business grew, he reinvested his profits into warehouses, trucks, and experienced men to guard his operation. As his success grew, so did the violence, as inter-gang warfare sprang out all over New York and the surrounding areas, and authorities increased security, forcing bootleggers to use a mixture of robbery and violent coercion. Bill's partner, J Shelvin, thought the escalating violence in New York was not for him, and he decided to take his share of the money that they had made and leave New York. But before he left Dwyer with $2,500 to use in an emergency. And it wasn't long before that dough was put to work. Sometime after Shelvin left the city, Dwyer, who was a hands-on boss, who sometimes drove his own trucks. I don't know what the hell's wrong with this guy. That makes no sense to me. But anyway, he was supposed to be smart. All right. Anyway, he was pulled over one night. No kidding. By two detectives that were not on his payroll, and they demanded immediate payment. Dwyer used the money Shelvin had left him, and he was released. As soon as the word got out among the police, Bill was inundated with offers of assistance in return for bribes. So what did Bill do? He set up a network for bribery that included officers of the New York Police Department, the Federal Prohibition Department, the New York political establishment, and the U.S. Coast Guard. He found himself at the head of a multi-million-dollar operation he treated like a business. But bootlegging ain't no regular business. All right. Along with the big bankrolls come the wolves. Bill was now the biggest supplier of illegal booze in America. While he controlled the New York area, once one of his trucks left to distribute bootleg booze to other parts of the country, he was vulnerable to hijackers. He needed protection and allies. He was engaged with Italian and Jewish criminals and sought to forge partnerships. Protection was a necessity for his operation by this point. But Dwyer had always considered himself a businessman and not a gangster. He needed a partner who had connections and who could speak the language of the underworld, and he soon found one. Because in 1924, after two of his shipments were hijacked, he used policemen on his payroll to identify the culprit. And he was a man he was well acquainted with, fellow Irishman, Oni Killer Madden. Now, if you ain't seen the Oni Madden video, you need to go back and check that out. I'll leave the little tag for you right here so you can go ahead and click on it. All right. At this time, Oni was fresh out of Sing Sing for the murder of Patsy Doyle. And once Bill knew who was responsible for the hijacking, he sent out a message to the underworld. Get me Oni Madden. I want to talk to him. I got a business proposition for him. Madden met Dwyer at his lawyer's office in Times Square, and an alliance was established to build America's largest bootlegging operation. Oni would supply the muscle and the underworld connections. In essence, Madden oversaw the violence that Dwyer so despised, but he knew was a necessary evil if he wanted his empire to survive. Dwyer also sat down with Italian boss Frank Costello and representatives of the Jewish mob. Soon a nationwide network was established, which was to be known as the Combine. By 1927, the Dwyer-Madden-Costello Combine carried huge weight in New York City. Dwyer's business acumen and ward boss Jimmy Hines' political influence and Madden's muscle, they were the most powerful of all criminal organizations in New York. Feeling secure, Bill set to work using millions to create the Phoenix Cereal Beverage Company. This was located on 26th Street and 10th Avenue, right in the heart of Hell's Kitchen. Madden was the front man, brewing what was to become known as Madden's #1 beer. Madden suggested to Dwyer that they bring in another partner, a fellow Irishman and former taxi firm owner Larry Fay. He would become the front man to distribute Madden's #1 beer and the rum and whiskey and vodka that the Combine was bringing into New York. Now, I feel there's a El Fay video coming soon. All right, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when it drops and you don't miss anything. All right. Madden and Dwyer also partnered with a former bootlegger named Sherman Billingsley at the Stork Club on East 53rd Street. Then Dwyer and Madden spread their business into Harlem when they bought the Club Deluxe from former heavyweight champ Jack Johnson. With Big Frenchie Demange as the operating manager, they changed the name to the Cotton Club, and it would go on to be one of the most famous clubs in New York. Now, the Cotton Club made a lot of dough for those three, and it allowed them to wash the illegal money that they were making from booze. Bill was always looking to make his empire bigger and rake in more dough. He traveled to Canada, England, and to the Caribbean to develop links with anyone who could supply him with liquor, and which he would then smuggle into the U.S. In the early days of Prohibition, bootleggers had it easy. This was before 1924, when the U.S. authorities sanctioned the construction of new, faster Coast Guard ships, especially equipped to halt the alcohol trade. But this didn't deter Bill. He just used his longshore connections and the money he already made from bootlegging to buy a fleet of ships that would meet with the supply ships miles out at sea. And there, they could load Bill's ships in peace. Once they reached U.S. waters and in the reach of the Coast Guard, the booze was transferred to a fleet of high-powered speedboats, which then delivered the illegal cargo at night. To get past the Coast Guard, Bill had another ingenious plan. He purchased hundreds of airplane engines left over from World War I, and he had them outfitted into his existing speedboats to create a fleet of ships now faster than any of those available to the authorities. The Coast Guard might be able to see them, but they couldn't catch them. They were also equipped with steel plating and high-caliber machine guns fitted just in case they were stopped. Once his boats reached land, they were unloaded at docks, which were protected by the local 791 of the International Longshoremen's Union, which was controlled by Dwyer and Madden. From the docks, the liquor was moved to several warehouses, again owned by Dwyer, in the New York area. When the time was right, trucks filled with illegal alcohol and protected by convoys of Teamster members transported the booze all over the country. This is amazing. The guy used the Teamsters Union, which is a trucking union, to ship booze across the country. That's intelligent. I love that. All right. His Combine supplied Florida, St. Louis, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and as far away as New Orleans. Dwyer was able to smuggle large amounts of booze into New York City because he knew one simple fact. You had to bribe the police and the Coast Guard if you wanted to be successful in the bootlegging business. And that Dwyer did, handing out thousands of dollars to anyone who would accept his generosity and was willing to turn a blind eye in return. Now, just a side note here. Now, we all know Frank Costello was known as the Prime Minister, and he was known for making bribes and paying off guys. This is maybe where he got it from, all right? He was a partner with Bill Dwyer, and this was Bill Dwyer's MO, to pay off everybody and make sure that everything works smooth. And this is what Frank Costello ended up doing for the rest of his life. So I just wanted to put that in there really quick. Now, paying off the New York cops was one thing. That was easy. Finding a cop who didn't have his hand out was rare. However, the Coast Guard was another thing. But Bill was skilled in that too. He was able to bribe a number of Coast Guard officers to look the other way when the ships came in. Soon the Combine was making hundreds of millions of dollars. But his reign as king of the rum runners wouldn't last long. Because in 1925, Bill Dwyer was arrested for attempting to bribe a Coast Guard member during the sting operation headed by the Prohibition Bureau. He was convicted and sentenced to 2 years. This was a shock to Bill. He had always looked upon himself as a businessman and never considered himself a gangster. While in prison, a despondent Dwyer told one of his cellmates, "I wish I'd never seen a case of whiskey. I spent years in daily fear of my life, always expecting to be arrested, always dealing with crooks and double crosses, and now look at me. My wife is heartbroken and I'm worse than broke." While Bill was in prison, Frank Costello and other Italian gangsters eased Madden aside and took over Bill's operation. Bill was released after 13 months for good behavior, and he realized that the underworld landscape had changed, and the Italian gangs were now taking a bigger bite out of the rotten apple. He was a realist and slowly began to withdraw from bootlegging. He started to invest his money into legitimate businesses, including sports teams, owning a football and 2 hockey teams. Bill first purchased the Hamilton Tigers of the National Hockey League and moved them to Madison Square Garden and renamed them the New York Americans. Now, Bill was accustomed to paying for what he wanted, so he would overpay just to get the best players, and he would bribe officials to win. He paid off line judges to award goals if the puck touched the goal line instead of passing over the line, which was the rule. Rumor has it that at a game in 1927 in Madison Square Garden, the goal judge, who Dwyer had on his payroll for some unknown reason, started taunting Ottawa goalie Alex Connell. Connell responded by busting the official in the nose with his hockey stick. Dwyer became incensed at the Ottawa goalie, and Connell was told to leave town quickly after the game. He was given a police escort to the train station, and they protected him until the train was safely out of town. After the train left the station, a man asked Connell if he was the Ottawa goalie, Alex Connell. Connell, afraid for his life, told the stranger no, and as a result, he lived to play another day. Now, Bill bypassed the league rule that said a person could not own 2 hockey teams. In 1929, Bill used an ex-lightweight boxing champ, Benny Leonard, as his frontman and purchased the NHL's Pittsburgh Pirates. In 1930, he bought the Daytona Triangles of the National Football League and moved the team to Ebbets Field in Brooklyn and renamed them the Brooklyn Dodgers. After 3 years of vastly overpaying his players, Dwyer began hemorrhaging so much money that he was forced to sell the Brooklyn Dodgers to 2 former New York Giant players, Chris Cagle and John Sims, for $25,000. Now, even though he sold the team for 10 times more than he had paid for them, Dwyer still lost $30,000 in the 3 years he owned the team. In 1934, Bill bought the famed Tropical Park horse racing track in Miami, Florida. Now, the authorities got sick of Bill's record of sporting bribery, and they came after him in 1935. Bill was indicted on gambling charges, but he was able to beat the case by using expensive and clever lawyers. But the authorities wanted to see the end of Bill's reign of interference in the American sporting world, and they filed a case of tax evasion against Bill Dwyer. This time, all his high-priced lawyers couldn't help, and the sporting career of the king of the rum runners was soon to be over. The charges were upheld, and Dwyer was stripped of all his assets except his family home in Belle Harbor, Queens, and the hockey team, the New York Americans. With no other assets, Dwyer could no longer afford the running costs of the New York Americans. This led the NHL to take temporary control of the club. Dwyer borrowed $20,000 from a pal named Red Dutton, the manager of the team. With this, he hoped to show the National Hockey League that he was solvent and regain control of his club. However, instead of paying his team's salary, the desperate Bill Dwyer decided to try to multiply his money in a craps game, and he lost it all. Unable to pay his team, and with no other way to raise any more capital, the NHL expelled Dwyer permanently and took final control of the New York Americans. Broken, despondent, Bill Dwyer retired to his Bell Harbor home in Queens. There he lived a quiet life with his wife until December 10th, 1943, when Big Bill Dwyer, the king of the rum runners, died at the age of 63 of unknown causes. I don't know why he died. All right, he was 63. Dwyer was reportedly penniless at the time of his death, and his only asset being the roof over his head. And that, my friends, is the straight dope on one Big Bill Dwyer. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed the story as much as I enjoyed telling it. Make sure you hit me with that AFBM down in the comments if you're one of the people that has seen every video I've done. All right, you're the true gang members. You guys are the inner circle. All right. Make sure you bump off that subscribe button if he pokes his nose out anywhere. I want it knocked off. Make sure you break that thumb. Hit that bell so you don't miss anything when I drop something new, because I got a lot of new things coming up. Believe me, you don't want to miss them. All right? It's been a few bad men. Keep your nose clean and don't take any wooden nickels. I see yous in the funnies.